Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Q&A celebrating National Disability Employment Awareness Month, the journey to your dream job. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Taylor Hartman and Tom Hudson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Taylor Hartman. I am one of the Assistant Directors of Employment Services. I oversee our pre-employment training program, our Skills to Pay the Bills virtual classes, and our summer program, SWEP and STEP.
And I'm Tom Hudson, and I'm also one of the assistant directors in the Employment Services Department. And my team primarily conducts VR-funded services, what we call discovery and exploration, and then job search and placement.
We can go ahead and get started to paint the picture of where to start if we're wanting to start the process of looking for a job.
Sure, Taylor, thank you. Generally, services in our department start with voc rehab. People, they'll call our department, they'll call the family navigators to inquire about how to begin services, and we recommend they start with VR. Also, a lot of times, high school students, either at their home school or in one of special school districts' vocational skills program sites, will connect with VR that way. So the initial meeting is called a planning conference, and that's where we spend some time meeting, talking about what services are going to look like, agreeing upon a service start date, and usually we like to schedule the exploration activities or assessments at that time as well, because that way everyone's present at the meeting, everyone has their calendars handy, so we can make sure that all of those appointments are on everyone's calendar at the same time. And so what an assessment consists of, it's kind of like a practice job. We will go out in the community and we'll work for 2, 3, 4 hours, and we don't really focus on a person's hard skills. We can teach anyone to put a can of corn in a grocery bag if we're bagging at Schnucks. What we focus on are soft skills and transferable skills, the skills we all have to have in order to be successful at a job. And soft skills are communication skills. Transferable skills are things like being organized, taking initiative, following instructions. So we track a lot of those interactions with the Schnucks employees, with customers. We could be stocking at Walgreens, maybe go to the food bank and work in a warehouse. So we do a lot of different things to evaluate a person's knowledge, skills, and abilities. And we try to wrap that process up in about 6 weeks. When we finish up, we reconvene with the VR counselor and the family members, the teacher, if they're involved. And we either recommend looking for a job or recommend a backup plan. 95% of the time we recommend looking for a job. The 5% of the time we recommend a backup plan. We never let people leave those meetings empty-handed. We always provide them with the resources necessary to implement those backup plans. One of which is a pre-employment training program. And Taylor, do you mind taking a few minutes to talk about pre-employment and how that can help people get to a point in their life where they can work independently out in the community?
Absolutely. So pre-employment training program is for individuals who are 18 and up. Typically, I do recommend that a person is finished with high school or vocational skills program, and that's just so we can fully prioritize our time with pre-employment and brushing up our work readiness. But through pre-employment, we are able to support individuals one-to-one. And how this works is participants will meet with their job coach 2 times per week. And we begin at the assessment phase, which during this time is when a job coach will fully get to know that participant that they're supporting. We want to know their interests, their skill set, their experience. On the flip side of that, we want to know what scenarios would not cause someone to be successful, what places to avoid, what are our areas for growth. We really want to get to know the person that we're supporting so we can lead them to success. And so throughout assessment, we are looking into potential training sites because our overall objective for pre-employment is to obtain and improve our work readiness through unpaid internships. So based off of the person we're supporting, based off their interest, we will go into the community to secure a training site. And then that moves us into our training phase where the job coach and the participant are meeting 2 times per week at the training site to fully learn the full scope of a role that then, they're acquiring the skills that would be necessary for paid employment. Again, we're doing this through unpaid internship opportunities, but that's why we're wanting to make this training opportunity as meaningful as possible. We want to make sure we're learning the full scope of the role. So then that way this person is able to, again, as Tom mentioned earlier, transfer those skills. Everything that we learn through pre-employment, we want that to be able to transfer into a paid position. So we're really careful in making sure that we're learning the full and entirety responsibility and tasks. So oftentimes we compare job descriptions to make sure that we're learning everything to make us successful. And not only the hard skills of the job, but also the soft and the social skills, as Tom mentioned as well too. I mentioned that our program is for individuals who are 18 and up, but that being said, there is no cap on our age. It's just a person who is 18 and up. So we oftentimes support individuals who are right out of high school or right out of vocational skills. But on the flip side, we've supported people who are wanting to re-enter the workforce or who've had a job successfully for a while, but had, something come up and they're wanting to brush up on those skills before they re-enter the workforce.
And we have a few questions. When should parents start working on the skills? Tips for working on these through chores.
Absolutely. So when parents can start working on those skills, I would say it's never too early to start. As soon as you find that opportunity to work on work readiness in the home, we see that translates over so well to employment. Oftentimes a question that I'll ask people who are new to our program is what chores do they do at home? What responsibilities do they have at home? Because if there are those things in place, we know that that'll translate over pretty well. There's already been that expectation for them to complete tasks and complete things and to be responsible for things at home. So then they're not taken back whenever there's also responsibilities and expectations at work. So I would say chores and just, household responsibilities as soon as possible, or even beyond that, to get a little creative. It might be that you're wanting to order in a pizza and maybe it's your son or daughter that is calling in the order and gaining their confidence in that way and those social skills to do those kind of tasks as well.
I agree, Taylor. Start giving your children chores as soon as possible. It's kind of a foggy memory, but I seem to recall my parents had me starting chores when I was about 6. I had to empty my little brother's dirty diapers into the diaper pail, and that was way before disposable diapers. And I had to take out the trash. One thing I always recommend to parents is to have their children make their bed every morning. Search YouTube for a video of a speech to the Naval Academy by Admiral McRaven. And he talks about the importance of making your bed. If you make your bed and you don't get another thing accomplished the rest of the day, you will have at least accomplished one thing. And that always leaves people with a positive feeling. So make your bed, take out the trash, feed the dog. Anything is a good start. And parents, there have to be consequences if your kids don't do their chores, because when they get a job and they don't do their job, there will be consequences. And if they know how to deal with those consequences early, they'll be able to deal with them professional way when they do get a job.
What about for someone that is 16? Do programs not begin until the age of 18? Or what about jobs while still in high school?
So that's a great question that I'll tackle. Our programs that we're mentioning within employment services, they are for adults 18 and up. However, there are programs such as SWEP and STEP that are for high school age students 16 to 20. So those are definitely good foundational programs to get involved in if you know that employment is eventually a goal. I highly recommend getting involved in SWEP in St. Louis County, or STEP if you're living within St. Charles County. It gives a great insight as to what having a job looks like, and it's throughout the course of the summer. So it doesn't interfere with the school year, but not only does it add experience to your resume, it truly adds a lot of skills that will translate over to pre-employment or another additional employment services program. So the way to get involved with either of those programs is to discuss with your son or daughter's teachers. Typically, applications for the following year's program, they go out in November, I believe, but it's never too early to start mentioning that and mentioning your interest. So if you have an IEP meeting, or if you have a meeting with your teachers prior to, go ahead and mention your interest in SWEP or STEP for the following summer, just so that can already be starting the process. Timeliness in completing your application, because there are so many students who are interested in both of those programs, that you do want to make sure that you're completing your application timely so you're considered for that next summer. Typically by February 1st is when applications are due. And so anything beyond that time, a student won't be able to participate.
Are SWEP and STEP applications managed on a first come, first served basis? If I submit my child's application in January, but my neighbor submits their child's application in February, are they, does that make a difference, or is it random?
Great question. So again, you want to submit your application as early as possible, so that is there for consideration. It's actually prioritized by age. So if a 16-year-old is coming into the program, but we've got an 18 or 19-year-old, and again, I'm sorry to clarify, I do not have any control over the way the applications are accepted. That is up to another agency. They're just then dispersed to us. But what I can share with you is the way they do it. If a 16-year-old applies and an 18 or 19-year-old, the older student will have precedence because they've got a shorter remaining time that they can continue with the program. So typically that our lead agency for either program will then, that kind of outweighs. But however, again, I want you to be considered for the program, so be sure to apply as soon as possible. So sooner that's in, the better. The other thing I just wanted to mention, employment programs are crucial if you know that employment is a future goal. We do have other summer programs at the ARC if your son or daughter is not quite ready to be working towards employment.
And then there's one more question. What's available for a 22-year-old living in Jefferson County?
My best suggestion is to call Annette Kendrick at Ponybird, and she can answer all of your Jefferson County employment services questions.
Hey, I saw there was one other question that I don't mind tackling. So it says, do you talk big picture for the future? Like if someone wants to work with the local professional sports team, how would you help build on that, starting with their first job? I love this question because we do have to start somewhere. Oftentimes in different webinars or discussions that Tom and I are part of, we'll ask where people had their first job, because all of us, none of us on this webinar started at the ARC in the very, very beginning. We had to start somewhere. So I think that's crucial to remember that when a person begins our program and they have their long-term dream job goal, we are going to realistically assess where we're at now in comparison to those requirements for that dream job. And if it's professional sports team, or if it's being a teacher or being a manager somewhere, we are going to realistically assess what prerequisites a person needs in order to acquire those positions, what experience they need, what skills they need. We're very, very realistic in all of this process. So if a person is not quite there yet, we're going to take a few steps back. What are some of our options to gain skills that could eventually maybe propel us towards those jobs or something similar? Sometimes we find that a person might have a dream job because of the uniform that person gets to wear. Or we supported someone who was very interested in being a professional sports player. But after we talked about it, it was because they enjoyed sports. They liked being around sports. So we were able to see that based off of their skill set and based off of their experience, they were able to train and work at a rec center where this person was around sports. They were actually responsible for putting up, volleyball nets or pickleball nets and different things like that, collecting the basketballs. So around sports enough that it fulfilled that need. So we want to break down the specifics of where that interest is, and then also our experience to see how we can get to that dream job or something similar.
Taylor, that is about as perfect an explanation as I've ever heard. We support a lot of young people who want a job with some sort of professional sports team. And unfortunately, those jobs are very, very scarce. So as Taylor said, we spend a lot of time getting to know the people we support and learning and understanding what their desire and motivation are for wanting a job in sports. We support a young man who is very active in Special Olympics, has won multiple medals, and he also wanted a job in professional sports, but it wasn't going to happen. It's hard to get past the gatekeepers. So he got hired by the YMCA to be a referee during the season of whatever sports season it is. So basketball starting up next month, and he's going to be a basketball referee. Between seasons, he's going to be a coach. In the spring and summer, he'll be a baseball umpire or a softball umpire, depending on what they're playing. So there are a lot of opportunities, as Taylor said, to work in the sports field without necessarily working for the Cardinals, the Blues, or City SC.
To kind of expand on that a little bit, Tom, I would say that's probably one of, if not the biggest benefit from assessment and pre-employment or discovery and exploration on your side of things. Really seeing if our dream job is exactly what we thought it would be, or, that ideal job that we had in our mind. Is it really all that it was cracked up to be? And do I have the skills and ability to fully fulfill that? I often think we've got lots of people who are animal lovers and who like to be around animals. I know on my side of things, I'm sure on yours too, Tom, we've got to see how realistic that is, the not so fun parts, the cleaning up after animals and, all the mess that can come with that. Sometimes we find that participants are no longer interested in that job, right? It's not as fun, or it's not as not as interesting as they once thought it was. So that's the bright side of either of those phases, is we're able to explore interest, find new areas of interest, and really hone in on skills that maybe we didn't know were top skills before.
Exactly. And regardless of what service someone is receiving from us, the discovery period is so important. When I first started in this field 26-ish years ago, I supported a young man who said he wanted to be a doctor. His parents knew he couldn't be a doctor. I knew he couldn't be a doctor, but I wasn't going to be the guy that said, you can't be a doctor. I asked him what it was about being a doctor that he liked. Just like Taylor said, find out what the motivation is. And he said, I think wearing a white lab coat would be cool. So I started looking for jobs within his skill set that would allow him to wear a white lab coat. And we found a job in the animal testing lab at Washington U Medical School. And he fed the animals, cleaned the cages, and the whole while he got to wear a white lab coat. And he was happy as a clam.
So it looks like there's two more questions. And Tom, I think we both can address them uniquely from each of our programs. So the first one is, when a job placement isn't successful, how do staff support the individual as well as the family? So I'll touch on it from my realm, and then I'm sure you'll have some pieces to add too. But on this page, you'll see our career planning process. And we often show this diagram, this picture to staff when we're, going through their onboarding and new training process. It's great to show that this is a cycle and it's continual. So we do hope that we are setting up a person to be successful, but we also know that oftentimes people have many jobs throughout their life. So if something does pop up where there's, that job was not as successful as we thought it would be, we go back to the drawing board if we can, and we see what barriers there are to successful employment, and see if one of our programs can help in that. So when a person is in their paid position and maybe they're let go because of those barriers, maybe we're needing to come back to pre-employment. And maybe those are some barriers that we can address through pre-employment training, and then go back, and attempt another paid job in the future. But that's definitely how the cycle continues. There's always some level of, a backup plan and other resources that we can look into.
And if someone is not interested in going through pre-employment, it can be a little more difficult. Timing is crucial, and without getting too far into the funding weeds, if someone has been out of job coaching for less than 90 days, contract with VR requires us to help them find another job. And we will reconvene with the VR counselor and discuss what the best path is. If finding another job is the right option for the person we're supporting, or, if they want to consider going into pre-employment. If they may choose neither. They may say, I don't want to work and I don't want to do pre-employment. And we respect everyone's right to choose. Sometimes their parents may have a different opinion, but if they're over 18 and they're their own guardian, they get to decide, not their parents. So it's kind of a complicated answer. It just depends on the timing. It also depends on the reason they lost their job. If they got laid off, well, yeah, that's not their fault. They shouldn't be punished or penalized by the system because they lost their job. We will absolutely help them find another job. If they got fired, then we're going to have to dig deep and find out what the reasons were and work with Voc Rehab and the person we're supporting to see if going back to work is the better choice for them at that moment. A lot of times, people we support, the stress of having a job causes them to exhibit some behaviors that never appeared before. We want to figure out what those triggers are. And if the triggers are work related, maybe we need to regroup and find a different path for that person. If they lost their job through no fault of their own, absolutely, we will help them find another job.
All right. Looks like it's the last question is, have your processes changed since the pandemic as employer and employee expectations are so different now? In fact, they often don't align at all. So from my view of things in pre-employment, our process has remained the same. Our process map as far as intake is step one, assessment phase is second, and then training phase. The overall process is the same. However, we are seeing that there for a little while, it was tougher to acquire training sites. As businesses were trying to manage their own staffing needs and getting back on their feet, it did interfere and sometimes inhibit us from training. Now, I will say that now things seem to be working well as far as that partnership. And we want to make sure that businesses know that it's a mutually beneficial partnership. Our training is not only helping the person that we support, but it's also helping their business, because we hope that they're, acquiring skills that eventually could either transfer over to that site or another site like them. So definitely it's changed a little bit, but to think optimistically, we seem to be moving in the right direction. Again, though, that's why it's so important that in training, we are acquiring the full scope of the role, and that we're not taking internship opportunities that only allow us to do partial. If you're only allowing us to do 2 or 3 responsibilities, but if I look on a job description, it's really in between 10 or 12. That's not going to set us up successfully for a paid position. So we'll decline that internship opportunity. We want to make sure that we're filling the entirety.
Thank you, Taylor. On the paid employment side of our department, the pandemic has definitely changed the way we approach our jobs. We follow very closely ADA language, which states all job candidates must be able to perform the essential job functions with or without a reasonable accommodation. Generally, in our case, a reasonable accommodation is a job coach. Sometimes we may have to find some type of assistive technology for an employee. The challenges that have arisen because of the pandemic are all businesses are short-staffed. So they are demanding more work from their employees. That means if someone we support can't meet the essential job functions, they're probably not going to get hired. They can't say, well, I want to work at a Valvoline instant oil change, but I don't want to change the oil. I just want to put the oil in. Well, that's not going to work. Essential job functions mean you have to perform all of the essential job functions. And the other reason that employers are so demanding right now, in addition to being short-staffed, is they're paying people a lot more. So when they pay people more, they expect more. There's a new Panda Express restaurant opening up very close to my house. They have a huge help wanted sign on the front of their building, and they're starting at $19 an hour. That's a lot of money for a part-time fast food job. So if they tell people they have to empty the trash and mop the floor and clean the toilets as part of the essential job functions to get that $19 an hour, that's what you have to do to get that job and get hired. So there's a lot of jobs available. There are at least 2 jobs for every applicant right now. But the applicants have to be willing to do all of the work, not just part of the work. Job carving, customized employment, they may work in some parts of the country. We've got relationships with about 350 different businesses in the St. Louis area. And I can't think of but 2 or 3 that are willing to job carve. And the problem with that is those jobs are only maybe 4 to 6 hours a week tops. So that's the other challenge. Yeah, finding a carve position for somewhere between 20 and 40 hours a week is really difficult, if not impossible. I will add, you reminded me of age guidelines. So usually with Voc Rehab funded services, on the younger end of the age range, VR starts taking students in their final semester of school. Now, whether that's when they're 18, 19, 20, or 21, that's depends on the student and what they're enrolled in. On the rare occasion where they do make an exception and enroll someone who's not in their final semester of school, in my experience, it has never ended successfully for that student. The pressures of finishing school, having a part-time job, and trying to have a social life, they seem to converge, and something has got to give, and it's usually the job. So my best advice is be patient, wait until your last semester of school, whichever age range you're in at that time, and then engage Voc Rehab.
We have one more question. If someone with autism never needed assistance until they were in their 30s, lost their job due to layoffs, could they contact you for the first time then?
Absolutely. There is no upper age limit to VR services. People can never exhaust VR funding. So if you have a job for 2 or 3 years, you want a different job, a better job, you can go back to VR. You can do that over and over and over again until, you don't want to work anymore. The only thing VR won't fund for repeat applicants is, let's say you're a bagger at Schnucks, but then you want to be a bagger at Deerbergs. They won't reopen your VR case to go to work at Deerbergs because it's the same job. It's a lateral move. That's what I'm looking for. It's a lateral move. They want people to advance in their careers and have more responsibility as they get older. So for the person with autism in their 30s, we have a dedicated service specifically designed for people with autism. Most of the people we've supported through that service, college degree, and if they don't have a degree, they usually have a very high level of ability. It's usually VR sets it aside for people with high functioning autism generally. And part of that process is partnering with our behavior supports team to develop a plan for success for the job seeker. Example that comes to mind is we were supporting a young man who couldn't keep a job for more than 2 weeks because he thought he always knew more than his bosses, and he never hesitated to tell his bosses so. And he'd wind up getting fired. So we took a different approach and involved our behavior supports team, and they came up with a very elegant and simple solution to help him be successful. They told him to keep some paper clips in his left pocket. And when he thought he should go tell his boss didn't know what he was doing, reach in his pocket, grab a paper clip, transfer it to his right hand, and put the paper clip in his right pocket. And just that short interval, it allowed him the time to think twice about telling his boss how to do his job. And while he never held a job for longer than 2 weeks before, we've supported him for well over a year. That's the benefit of working with our behavior supports team, is they help us develop plans for success.
And there's one more question. If our child is already out of school, do we start with VR first or someplace like the ARC?
VR first, because VR pays us to provide the service. VR doesn't really provide any services. It will contract with us or UCP Heartland, Preferred Employment, all the different agencies in St. Louis that have a contract with them to provide employment services. What I do recommend, when you do call VR and you have that first meeting with your VR counselor, they will give you a list of agencies to call. I recommend you call all of them and keep track of who you speak to and what they say, and also keep track of people who you have to leave a message for and don't call back. After you've made all the calls on the list, then call the VR counselor back and let them know that you're ready to make your informed choice.
So to also add to that, if you know that your son or daughter is needing extra time with their work skills, extra time improving their speed, their stamina, their social skills, if you know that we're not quite ready for a job, go ahead and reach me in regards to pre-employment training. Pre-employment training is funded by our SB 40 boards. So in short, St. Louis County residents are funded through the Productive Living Board. St. Charles County residents are funded by the Developmental Disabilities Resource Board. So Voc Rehab is not a funder for pre-employment training. That being said, so again, if we know that we're going to need more time, we're going to need some help becoming ready, you can connect with pre-employment prior to ever connecting with Voc Rehab. If you're not quite sure, you can definitely connect with Voc Rehab, because again, as Tom explained in the beginning, through discovery and exploration, that'll guide, what that next step is, whether it's moving forward with a job or if it is moving on to pre-employment. Because pre-employment has a consistent wait list, it's never too soon to get on our wait list. too. So if you know that that might be an option for you, just go ahead, connect with me. I'll get you on our wait list. And then that way, regardless of, you know, if you connect with VR or just upon graduation, you move forward with pre-employment, you're on our list and ready to go. And if you move forward with VR and you're deemed ready for employment, we'll just remove you from the pre-employment wait list.
Thank you, Taylor. And if you want to contact me about voc rehab services, feel free to do so.
So be sure to join us for the other Q&As celebrating National Disability Employment Awareness Month, choosing the best employment provider for you, employment first, how the Department of Mental Health has prioritized employment, shifting from a caregiver to an advisor, and the impact on employment outcomes. And thank you guys so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming. Again, reach us if there's any other questions.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck with your job search. Thanks, Kate.